Her old cabin was sinking into the river when she discovers a secret hidden for years. Jennifer felt the wooden floor sway beneath her feet as the waters of the Shenandoah River rose higher and higher. For 3 days the rain hadn't stopped, and the small cabin where she had lived with her 3 children for 8 years was beginning to sink slowly into the muddy waters. That's when Tyler, her 15-year-old son, shouted desperately, pointing to a golden light shining through the loose floorboards. "Mom, look at this! There's something under the floor." The boy plunged his hands into the icy water that already covered part of the cabin floor, trying to pull up one of the planks that had come loose in the flood. Jennifer approached carefully, holding 10-year-old Emily by the hand and carrying 6-year-old Ethan in her arms. The children watched curiously as Tyler managed to completely lift one of the rotten planks. There, protected by a thick plastic bag tied with string, was a package yellowed with time. The golden light they had seen was the reflection of the late afternoon sun on the waters, now invading the secret compartment. "What do you think this is, Mom?" Emily approached, her eyes wide with curiosity. Jennifer took the package with trembling hands. She had never imagined there was a hiding place under the cabin floor. When they arrived there, fleeing the violence in the big city, the building was already old and had been abandoned for years. The previous owner had made it clear they could stay until they found another place, but that never happened. "Let's see what's in here," she murmured, carefully undoing the knots in the string. Inside the bag was a rusty but still sturdy metal box. Jennifer opened it slowly, revealing several folded documents, some old photographs, and a small golden key. The photographs showed the cabin in its glory days, with a new pier and a small plantation around it. In some pictures, a middle-aged man posed next to a smiling woman and 2 small children. Who could these people be? Tyler picked up one of the photos, examining the man's face, which somehow seemed familiar. Jennifer unfolded one of the documents and almost dropped everything in the water. It was a property deed. The name listed as the owner made her choke: Robert Henderson Clark, her late husband's surname. "This can't be true," she whispered, rereading the document several times. Michael had always said he was an orphan, that he never knew his family. He said he had been raised in an orphanage in Richmond until he was 18, when he left to work in construction. He never mentioned having relatives or property. "Mom, the water is rising really fast." Emily pointed worriedly at the level, which was already up to the children's knees. Jennifer quickly put all the documents back in the box and wrapped it in the plastic again. They needed to get out before the cabin sank completely. "Tyler, grab what you can carry. Emily, Ethan, let's get to the canoe." The family headed to the small wooden boat tied beside the cabin. It was the only transportation they had to get around during floods. Tyler rowed vigorously, while Jennifer held the box to her chest, feeling their lives might be about to change forever. They headed to Mrs. Dorothy's house, a 70-year-old woman who lived in a stilt house on higher ground, about 500 meters upriver. She was the closest neighbor and had always been kind to the family, especially after Michael died in a work accident 2 years before. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Mrs. Dorothy welcomed them with open arms, as she always did. She was a small woman, with completely white hair tied in a low bun, wrinkles that told of decades of a simple life by the river. Come in. You can stay here as long as you need. This flood is worse than the one 10 years ago," she said, helping the children up the stairs of her house. While Mrs. Dorothy prepared hot coffee and made space for the children to sleep, Jennifer couldn't stop thinking about the documents. Once everyone was settled, and the children were distracted watching a program on the old television, she approached the hostess. "Mrs. Dorothy, did you know the man who lived in our cabin before we arrived well?" The woman stopped stirring the sugar in her coffee and looked at her with interest. "Robert? Of course I knew him. He lived there for over 20 years. Why do you ask, my dear?" Jennifer's heart raced. So the man in the photographs was really named Robert Henderson Clark. "Do you know what happened to him? Why did he leave?" Mrs. Dorothy took a deep sigh and sat in the chair next to Jennifer. "Poor Robert. He didn't leave, my dear. He disappeared. It was about 15 years ago. One day he was there, the next he had vanished without a trace. The police investigated, but they never found anything. Disappeared how? No one knows. His wife, Mrs. Barbara, said he went out fishing in the morning and never came back. They found his canoe empty, floating downriver, but his body never surfaced. Jennifer felt a shiver run down her spine. If Robert Henderson Clark was related to Michael, that meant her husband had lied about being an orphan. But why? And his wife? What happened to her? Mrs. Barbara was very shaken. A few months later, she sold everything she could and left for the city, said she couldn't bear to live in that place anymore. The cabin has been abandoned ever since. Do you remember if Robert had any children? Mrs. Dorothy thought for a moment. They had 2 sons, both boys. The older one was called, let me remember, Michael. Yes, Michael. And there was another, younger one named Daniel, but they were already adults when their father disappeared. Michael had been living far away for years, I think, in Richmond. Daniel had also left to study in the city. Jennifer almost dropped her coffee cup. Michael was the son of Robert Henderson Clark. Her husband had lied about his entire family history, but why would he hide having parents and owning property? Are you absolutely sure the son's name was Michael? Absolutely. I remember well because the boy used to spend his vacations here when he was little. He was the spitting image of his father, dark-haired, tall, with those green eyes. A hard-working young man always helped his father with fishing and the small farm. Jennifer swallowed hard. Michael had green eyes, exactly as Mrs. Dorothy was describing. It couldn't be a coincidence. Mrs. Dorothy, could you tell me if Robert left anything for his sons? Some kind of inheritance? The elderly woman looked at her with renewed curiosity. Why so much interest in Robert, my dear? Has something happened? Jennifer hesitated for a moment, but decided to trust Mrs. Dorothy. After all, she had been the only person who helped them when they arrived there, with no family and no money. Mrs. Dorothy, I think my Michael was Robert's son. The woman's eyes widened. Your Michael? The one who passed away in the accident? Yes. We found some documents today in the cabin as it was sinking. Documents with the name Robert Henderson Clark. And Michael always said he was an orphan, but now I'm starting to suspect he lied. Mrs. Dorothy slowly got up and went to an old cabinet in the corner of the room. She returned carrying an old shoebox. If your Michael was indeed Robert's son, then these things here might be of interest. When Mrs. Barbara left, she gave me a few things that had belonged to her husband. She said she didn't want to take them with her, but she also didn't want to throw them away. Inside the box were more photographs, some fishing gear, and a notebook with notes. Jennifer leafed through the notebook carefully and found several lists with names and numbers that looked like geographic coordinates. Robert was always very organized, said Mrs. Dorothy. He wrote everything down. Where he fished, how much he sold, where he owned properties. Properties? He owned more than one? Oh, yes. Robert wasn't a rich man, but he was clever. Over the years he bought small pieces of land here and there. Nothing too big, but always in strategic places. He said that one day these lots would be worth a lot of money. Jennifer felt hope growing in her chest. If Michael was really Robert's son, and if he had never claimed the inheritance, then she and the children could have rights to these properties. Do you know where these lands were located? Some were right here in the region. One was near the city, where that new shopping center is now. Another was along the highway that connects Savannah to Charleston, and there were a few others scattered about. Jennifer's heart beat faster and faster. The shopping center Mrs. Dorothy mentioned was an area that had appreciated greatly in recent years. If Robert really owned properties there, they could be worth a fortune. Mrs. Dorothy, do you think these documents I found today can prove that Michael was Robert's son? It depends on what's in them, my dear. But if there are documents in the name of Robert Henderson Clark, and your Michael had the same last name, it's a good start. That night, Jennifer could barely sleep. She lay on the makeshift mattress Mrs. Dorothy had arranged in the living room, staring at the ceiling and trying to process everything she had discovered. Michael had hidden his true identity from her. But why? The next morning, the water level had dropped a little. Jennifer decided to return to the cabin with Tyler to try to recover something more before the structure collapsed completely. "Mom, do you really think Dad lied about his family?" Tyler asked as he rode toward the cabin. "I don't know, son. But something doesn't add up in this whole story. Your father was always very private about the past, but I never imagined he could have hidden something so important." When they reached the cabin, they saw it was almost completely submerged. Only the roof and the top part of the walls were still visible above the water. It would be impossible to recover anything else. "At least we managed to save those documents," said Tyler, trying to comfort his mother. Back at Mrs. Dorothy's house, Jennifer examined all the papers she had found once again. Besides the cabin's deed, there were other documents that appeared to be property records, some purchase and sale contracts, and a series of tax payment receipts. One document especially caught her attention. It was a birth certificate. Robert Henderson Clark, born in 1952, and below a handwritten note, "Children, Michael Henderson Clark, born in 1978, Daniel Henderson Clark, born in 1982. Jennifer checked Michael's birth date. It matched perfectly. There was no longer any doubt. Her husband was the son of Robert Henderson Clark, and had hidden this from her throughout their marriage. "Now I need to find out why he did this," she murmured to herself. Mrs. Dorothy approached, carrying a tray with sandwiches for lunch. "Did you discover anything else important?" "I'm now certain that Michael was Robert's son. I found a birth certificate with his name." "Then you may have a right to the properties Robert left behind." "But how do I claim them? I don't understand anything about legal matters." Mrs. Dorothy thought for a moment. "Here in town, there's a lawyer, Attorney David Morrison. He has helped many people in the region with land problems. He's an honest man and doesn't charge too much. Perhaps he can advise you." Jennifer decided that the next day she would go to town to look for this lawyer. She needed to find out what her rights were and how she could claim them. The following afternoon, after leaving the children with Mrs. Dorothy, Jennifer took the bus to town. Savannah was an hour and a half away, and she had gathered the money she had saved for emergencies to pay for the fare and the consultation with the lawyer. Attorney David Morrison had a small office in the city center. He was a man of about 50, with graying hair, prescription glasses, and a gentle expression. He received Jennifer with patience and attention, listening to the whole story without interruptions. "Mrs. Jennifer, from what you're telling me, you may indeed have rights to the properties of Robert Henderson Clark, especially if we can prove that your late husband was his son. And how do we do that? First, we need to officially register Mr. Robert's death. If he really disappeared 15 years ago and was never found, we can request a judicial declaration of absence and later a presumption of death. And then? Then, with the documents you brought and a few more certificates we'll need to request, we can open a probate process. If your Michael was indeed Robert's son and never claimed the inheritance, the rights automatically pass to his descendants." Jennifer felt a mix of hope and anxiety. The situation seemed complicated, but Attorney David spoke with a confidence that reassured her. "Attorney, how long does a process like this take?" "It depends on many factors. If there are no objections and all the documents are in order, it can take between 6 months and a year. If any complications arise, it may take longer." "And how much does it cost?" Attorney David smiled understandingly. "I'll be frank with you. This type of process is normally expensive, especially if the properties are valuable. But from what I see here, you have a solid case. I can propose an arrangement. I cover all the process expenses now, and when we recover the properties, you pay me with a percentage of the value." It was a tempting offer, but Jennifer hesitated. Life had taught her that when something seemed too good to be true, it usually was. "What kind of percentage are you talking about?" 20% of the total value recovered. It's well below what other lawyers would charge for a case like this." Jennifer thought for a few moments. Even losing 20%, much more would remain than she could ever dream of having. And without the lawyer, she wouldn't be able to do anything on her own. "I accept the proposal, Attorney." Attorney David extended his hand to seal the agreement. "Perfect. We'll start next week. I need you to bring all the certificates you can find. Birth, marriage, your husband's death. And of course, all those documents you found in the cabin. On the way back home, Jennifer could barely contain her anxiety. For the first time since Michael had passed away, she felt that perhaps there was hope for a better life for her and the children. When she arrived at Mrs. Dorothy's house, she found the children playing in the yard. Emily was teaching Ethan how to make paper boats, while Tyler was helping Mrs. Dorothy mend a fishing net. "So, Mom, how did it go in town?" Tyler approached, curious. "It went well, son. The lawyer said we have a good chance of recovering Grandpa Robert's properties." "Grandpa Robert?" Emily stopped folding the paper and looked at her mother. "Yes, my daughter. We discovered that Daddy did have family. And you have a grandfather who owned some land here in the region." Ethan, who still didn't quite understand what was happening, just smiled and continued playing with the little boats in the basin of water. That night, Jennifer told the whole situation to Mrs. Dorothy, who listened attentively to everything. "My dear, I have to tell you something important," the lady said when Jennifer finished telling her about the visit to the attorney. "What is it, Mrs. Dorothy?" "Some of those properties that Robert had might be occupied by other people now. After he disappeared and Mrs. Barbara left, many people thought the lands were abandoned." "How so?" "There's a businessman here in the region, a certain Preston Caldwell, who has bought several properties in recent years. Some people say he doesn't always buy in a, let's say, very clear way." Jennifer felt a knot in her stomach. "Are you saying he might have taken over Robert's lands?" "I don't know, my dear, but it's good for you all to be careful. Preston is very influential here in the region. He has money and knows a lot of important people." This information left Jennifer worried, but she decided she couldn't give up now. She had a chance to give her children a better life, and she wasn't going to let fear stop her from trying. The following week, Attorney David Morrison began the work of gathering documents and preparing the case. Jennifer had to make several trips to the city to sign papers, provide information, and follow the progress of the requests. It was during one of these visits that she met Mrs. Hope, a 68-year-old lady who worked at the Civil Registry Office. She was a black woman with short graying hair, always very well put together, despite her modest salary. "Are you dealing with properties of the late Robert Henderson Clark?" Mrs. Hope asked, when Jennifer went to request some certificates. "Yes, ma'am. I discovered that my husband was his son." Mrs. Hope looked around to check if anyone was listening and moved closer to Jennifer. "Can I give you some advice? Be very careful. I've seen other people trying to reclaim properties that belonged to Robert, and they all gave up along the way." "Why did they give up?" "They started having problems, pressures. Some even received threats." Jennifer felt her blood run cold. "What kind of threats?" "Look, I can't say much because I work here, but this Preston Caldwell has a lot of power, and he doesn't like it when someone messes with properties he considers his. But the properties were Robert's, not his." "I know, dear, but sometimes what's right and what happens in practice are two very different things." Jennifer left the registry office more worried than when she arrived, but when she thought of Tyler, Emily, and Ethan, she knew she had to move forward. They deserved a chance at a better future. 2 weeks later, Attorney David called her to his office with news. "Mrs. Jennifer, I have good news and bad news." "Go ahead, Attorney." "The good news is that we have officially confirmed that your husband, Michael, was indeed the son of Robert Henderson Clark. We have all the necessary certificates and the documents are in order." "And the bad news?" "The bad news is that we discovered 3 of Robert's properties were transferred into the name of Preston Caldwell in the last 10 years. Jennifer felt the floor sway beneath her feet. "Transferred how? Can he do that?" "Not legally, considering Robert was never officially declared deceased, and there was never a probate. I'm investigating how these transfers were made." "And now?" "Now we will contest these transfers in court. It will be more complicated than I initially imagined, but we still have a chance to win." That night, Jennifer could barely sleep again. I was beginning to understand why Michael had hidden his true identity. Perhaps he knew that claiming his father's inheritance would be dangerous. The next morning, she received an unexpected visitor. A well-dressed man, about 45 years old, drove up to Mrs. Dorothy's house. "Are you Jennifer Henderson Clark?" he asked, removing his sunglasses. "Yes, I am. Who are you?" My name is Preston Caldwell. I need to speak with you. Jennifer felt her heart race. He was exactly the man Mrs. Dorothy and Mrs. Hope had spoken about. About what? Preston smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. About those properties you're trying to claim. I think we can come to an arrangement that's good for everyone. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. Jennifer looked at Mrs. Dorothy, who was in the kitchen doorway watching the conversation with concern. The children were playing in the yard, fortunately far enough away not to hear the talk. What kind of arrangement? Jennifer asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Look, I know you're going through a tough time. Losing your home in the flood, having to care for 3 children alone. It can't be easy. I'm willing to offer a generous sum for you to drop this property matter. The properties are my children's right by inheritance. Preston chuckled softly. Mrs. Jennifer, do you really believe you can prove that in court? I have legal purchase documents for those lands. They were acquired completely legally. From whom did you buy them? From the widow of Robert Henderson Clark, Barbara Clark. She had power of attorney to sell on her husband's behalf. Jennifer felt as if she'd been punched in the stomach. If Barbara really had power of attorney to sell the properties, that complicated everything. That's not possible. Robert disappeared. He was never officially declared deceased. But Barbara was the legitimate wife, and at the time she really needed the money. I did her a favor, actually. Attorney David said those sales aren't legal. Preston's smile grew colder. Attorney David is a lawyer, let's say, inexperienced in more complex matters. You're wasting your time and money with him. Jennifer crossed her arms, trying to appear more resolute than she felt. Even so, I will continue with the lawsuit. Preston sighed and shook his head. Mrs. Jennifer, I'm being kind because I respect your situation. But I need to make one thing clear. Those properties are mine now, and I won't let anyone take what's mine from me. And I won't let anyone take what belongs to my children. The tension in the air was almost palpable. Preston put his sunglasses back on and headed for his car. I hope you reconsider your decision. It would be a shame if things got unpleasant. After he left, Mrs. Dorothy approached Jennifer. My dear, that man scared me. Maybe it's better to accept the money he offered. Mrs. Dorothy, if I accept his money, I'll be admitting he has a right to the properties, and the documents we found prove the lands belong to my children by inheritance. But what if he's not bluffing about being dangerous? Jennifer looked at the children playing in the yard. Tyler was teaching Ethan to fish with an improvised rod, while Emily was collecting flowers to make a bouquet. They deserved to have a better future, and she wasn't going to let fear stop her from fighting for it. I'll talk to Attorney David about this power of attorney story. If Preston really bought the lands legally, then we'll find out. If not, we'll prove he's lying. The next day, Jennifer returned to the city to meet with the attorney. Attorney David Morrison listened to the account of Preston's visit with growing concern. Mrs. Jennifer, I need to investigate this matter of the power of attorney. If Barbara really had the legal authority to sell the properties, that changes everything. But how could she have had a power of attorney if Robert had disappeared? There are a few possibilities. She could have obtained a power of attorney before the disappearance, or she could have petitioned the court for authorization to sell the assets as a needy widow. And if she did that, do we still have a chance? Attorney David thought for a moment. It depends on the details. If the power of attorney was executed when Robert was still present, it might be valid. But if she sold the properties without proper legal authorization, we can still contest it. What do you need to find this out? I will request all the records of the property transfers. That will show me exactly how and when the sales were made, and if all the legal procedures were followed correctly. A week later, Attorney David obtained the transfer documents. When Jennifer arrived at the office to see the results, she found the attorney with a serious expression. Mrs. Jennifer, I've discovered some interesting things. Please tell me, attorney. First, Barbara did sell 3 properties to Preston Caldwell between 2015 and 2018. But there's something odd about the documents. What is it? Barbara's signatures on the deeds are different from each other. It looks like they were forged, at least in 2 of the 3 sales. Jennifer felt a mix of anger and hope. Does that mean the sales are illegal? If we can prove the signatures are fake, yes, but we'll need a handwriting expert analysis, and that costs money. How much? About 3,000 Rs. It was an amount Jennifer didn't have, but Attorney David offered to cover the cost of the analysis as part of their agreement. Attorney, if the signatures are indeed fake, what happens? Then we can prove Preston obtained the properties fraudulently. That not only gives us the right to reclaim them, but could also result in criminal charges against him. The analysis was done by a specialist from Charleston and took 2 weeks to be completed. When the results arrived, Attorney David called Jennifer immediately for a meeting. Mrs. Jennifer, I have excellent news. The analysis confirmed that 2 of Barbara's 3 signatures were forged. This means 2 properties were obtained by Preston completely illegally. And the 3rd one? The 3rd signature appears to be authentic, but we will still contest it because Barbara did not have the legal authority to sell the assets without a formal probate. What do we do now? Now we file a lawsuit to annul the fraudulent sales and claim the properties. We will also notify the district attorney's office about the forgeries. Jennifer left the attorney's office feeling more hopeful than she had felt in weeks. They finally had concrete proof that Preston had acted illegally, but the joy was short-lived. 2 days later, while she was in town shopping with the money Mrs. Dorothy had lent her, Jennifer received a desperate call from Tyler. "Mom, you need to come back here now. Some men showed up looking for you." "What men?" "I don't know, Mom. They arrived by car and were asking Mrs. Dorothy a bunch of questions. They wanted to know where you were and when you'd be back." Jennifer felt fear rise in her throat. "Where are you now?" "We're hiding at Mr. Samuel's house across the river. Mrs. Dorothy told us to come here until you got back. Stay there with the children. I'm on my way back now." Throughout the entire bus ride back home, Jennifer couldn't stop thinking about what might be happening. Could it be Preston trying to intimidate her again? When she arrived at Mr. Samuel's house, she found the children frightened and Mrs. Dorothy very nervous. "My dear, those men weren't from around here. They looked like city folk, well-dressed but with unfriendly faces." "What did they ask?" "They wanted to know everything about you all. How long you've lived here, how you arrived, if you have any relatives around. They asked a lot of questions about Michael, too." "About Michael?" "They wanted to know how he died, if he left anything for the family, if you had any documents of his." Jennifer hugged the children, trying to convey a sense of security she wasn't feeling. "Mom, did we do something wrong?" Emily asked with eyes full of tears. "No, sweetheart, you didn't do anything wrong. It's just a complicated adult situation, but it will pass." Mr. Samuel, a fisherman about 60 years old, who had known the family for years, approached. "Jennifer, if you want to stay here a few days until things calm down, please make yourselves at home." "Thank you, Mr. Samuel. I think that's best." That night, after the children fell asleep, Jennifer talked with Mrs. Dorothy and Mr. Samuel about the situation. "Do you think those men were sent by Preston?" "I have no doubt," said Mr. Samuel. "That man has a reputation for using rather, let's say, unorthodox methods when he wants something. But what can he do? We're following all the proper legal channels." Mrs. Dorothy sighed. "My dear, men with a lot of money and power sometimes think they're above the law. They apply pressure in every possible way to get what they want. So, you think I should give up?" Mr. Samuel and Mrs. Dorothy exchanged worried looks. "I can't tell you what to do, Jennifer," said Mr. Samuel, "but I can tell you that, if it were me, I'd think very carefully about whether it's worth taking these risks with 3 young children to care for." Jennifer looked at the children sleeping on the makeshift mattress. Tyler was hugging Ethan, protecting his younger brother, even in sleep. Emily held tightly a rag doll she had received from Mrs. Dorothy. Was it worth putting her children's safety at risk for properties she might never recover? The next morning, she decided to call Attorney David and tell him what had happened. "Mrs. Jennifer, this confirms we are on the right track. Preston wouldn't be applying pressure if he didn't know he could lose the properties. But what if he does something to me or the children? I will file a protective order for your family, and I will also speed up the legal process. The faster we get a decision, the better." "Attorney, I'm starting to get scared. Maybe it's better to accept the money he offered." There was silence on the other end of the line for a few seconds. "Mrs. Jennifer, I understand your fear. It's natural. But I need you to know one thing. According to my calculations, just one of the properties we're claiming is worth more than $500,000 nowadays." Jennifer almost dropped the phone. $500,000? Yes. It's the property near the new commercial center. The market value has skyrocketed in recent years because of the area's development. And the other two? One is worth about $200,000 and the other about $150,000. We're talking about nearly $1 million in total. Jennifer had to sit down. She had never imagined the properties could be worth so much money. "And how much did Preston offer for me to give up?" "How much did he offer?" "He didn't specify, just said a generous amount. I bet it's no more than $50,000, far less than what the properties are actually worth." Now Jennifer understood why Preston was applying so much pressure. He had acquired properties worth nearly $1 million for far less than that. "Attorney David, how long until we get a court decision?" "If all goes well, about 6 to 8 weeks. I've already filed all the documents, and the forensic analysis of the forged signatures is very strong evidence in our favor. And in the meantime?" "In the meantime, I recommend you stay in a safe place and avoid contact with Preston or anyone connected to him." After the call, Jennifer felt torn between the hope of securing a better life for her children and the fear of what might happen before then. She spent the following days at Mr. Samuel's house, helping Mrs. Dorothy with the household chores and trying to keep the children distracted. Tyler, being the oldest, sensed that something serious was happening but didn't ask questions. Emily and Ethan seemed to view everything as an extended adventure. A week later, Mr. Samuel returned from a fishing trip with worrying news. "Jennifer, I ran into Robert down at the harbor. He said some men have been asking about you at several houses in the area." "What kind of questions?" "They want to know where you're hiding, if you have relatives in other cities, that sort of thing. And what are people saying? Most are saying they don't know anything. Folks around here stick together. No one's going to give you up." Jennifer felt grateful to be part of such a supportive community, but also worried about what these people might suffer because of her. "Mr. Samuel, I don't want you all to have problems on my account." "Jennifer, this community has seen plenty of powerful people trying to push us out over the years. We know how to deal with these types." 2 days later, Attorney David called with an important update. "Mrs. Jennifer, I've obtained the protective order for your family. If anyone tries to intimidate or threaten you, they can be arrested. Will it work? It should discourage more direct actions, but I recommend you continue staying in a safe location until we get the final ruling." "Any news about the lawsuit?" "Yes. The judge has scheduled a hearing for 3 weeks from now. It will be our chance to present all the evidence and hear Preston's defense. What if he manages to prove the purchases were legal? With the evidence we have, especially the forensic analysis of the forged signatures, I believe we have a 90% chance of winning." The odds were good, but Jennifer couldn't stop worrying about the 10% chance of losing everything. The following week, something unexpected happened. Barbara, Robert Henderson Clark's widow, showed up in the area. Mrs. Dorothy saw her at the town market and came to tell Jennifer immediately. "My dear, Barbara is here. After 15 years, she's back." "Why did she come back?" "I don't know, but she was asking about you at the market. She wanted to know who this Jennifer was, who was stirring things up with Robert's properties." Jennifer felt her heart race. Barbara's arrival could complicate the situation even further. How did she look? Did she seem nervous? Yes, she did, and thinner, older. The years haven't been easy on her. "Mrs. Dorothy, do you think she came on her own, or someone brought her here?" "I don't know, but it's quite a coincidence for her to show up right now, don't you think?" Jennifer agreed. It was very likely that Preston had brought Barbara back to try to strengthen his defense in the lawsuit. That same afternoon, Barbara appeared at Mr. Samuel's house. She was a woman of about 55, with graying hair, simple but clean clothes. She looked tired and nervous. "Are you Jennifer?" she asked, standing at the door without entering. "Yes, I am." "You're Barbara?" "I am." I need to speak with you about all this property mess. Jennifer looked at Mr. Samuel, who nodded discreetly to indicate it was all right. Please come in, Mrs. Barbara. Barbara sat on the edge of the chair, clearly uncomfortable. Look, I didn't come here to cause trouble, but I need to make one thing clear. I sold those properties legally. I had every right to do it. Mrs. Barbara, with all due respect, but how could you sell properties without taking inventory? Barbara took a deep breath. When Robert disappeared, I was left with nothing. He always took care of everything, the paperwork, the business. I didn't even really know what he had. And then the years passed. I had no money. The children had vanished too. Michael never got in touch again after he went to Richmond, and Daniel went to New York and also stopped writing. Jennifer was surprised. So Michael really had stopped contacting his mother. Did you try to look for them? Yes, I tried, but I couldn't find them. Then this man, Preston, showed up offering to buy the properties. He said he would help me with all the paperwork. And you accepted? I needed the money, young lady. I was in need. He offered a good sum and said everything would be done legally. But did you sign all the documents personally? Barbara hesitated before answering. Look, Preston said that sometimes I could let him handle the paperwork because I didn't understand much about these things. Are you saying he forged your signature? I'm not saying that. I'm saying I gave him authorization to handle everything. Jennifer realized Barbara was lying, probably out of fear or because Preston had instructed her to. Mrs. Barbara, my husband Michael was your son. My children are your grandchildren. I'm not trying to harm you, just to secure their rights. Barbara looked at the children, who were playing in the backyard. These are Michael's children? Yes, they are. For a few seconds, Barbara's expression softened. Michael, how did he... He died in a work accident 2 years ago. A beam fell on him at the construction site. Barbara brought her hands to her face and began to cry softly. My boy. I always hoped he would come back one day. Mrs. Barbara, why did Michael never tell me he had a family? He always said he was an orphan. Barbara wiped her tears and looked at Jennifer with sadness. After his father disappeared, we had a terrible fight. Michael thought I should have waited longer before trying to sell things. He said I was betraying his father's memory. And then he left. He did. He said that when he came back he wanted to find everything the way his father left it. Since that didn't happen, I think he preferred to pretend he had no family. Jennifer felt a mix of sadness and understanding. Michael had been too proud to accept that his mother needed to sell the properties to survive. Mrs. Barbara, you know you have grandchildren here, right? They would like to meet their grandmother. Barbara looked at the children again but shook her head. I can't, young lady. It would just complicate things further. Because of Preston? Barbara stood up quickly. I have to go. I only came here to make it clear that I sold everything legally. I don't want any more trouble in my life. After Barbara left, Jennifer kept thinking about the conversation. It was clear the woman was being pressured by Preston, but it was also evident that she regretted having lost contact with her children. 3 days before the hearing, attorney David Morrison called with worrying news. Mrs. Jennifer, Preston has filed a motion trying to postpone the hearing. Can he do that? He can try. He's claiming he needs more time to gather defense documents. And will the judge accept it? I don't know. We'll find out tomorrow. Jennifer spent the night unable to sleep. She was so close to a resolution that the possibility of having to wait longer made her anxious. The next day, Attorney David called with the decision. The judge denied the request for postponement. The hearing will proceed tomorrow. That's good. But there's something else. Preston obtained authorization for Barbara to testify in his favor during the hearing. What do you mean? She's going to say she sold the properties of her own free will and that all the signatures on the documents are hers. But the forensic analysis proved 2 signatures were forged. Yes, but if Barbara says she authorized someone to sign for her, that could complicate our situation. Jennifer felt as if she had been doused with a bucket of cold water. So we could lose? Not necessarily. We still have very strong evidence. But the situation has gotten more complicated. On the day of the hearing, Jennifer went to the city, accompanied by attorney David Morrison. She left the children with Mrs. Dorothy and Mr. Samuel, who promised to take good care of them. The courthouse was an old building in downtown Savannah. When Jennifer arrived, she saw Preston talking with his lawyers at the door. He looked at her with a smile that showed no friendliness. Barbara was also there, looking even more nervous than when she had visited Jennifer. She avoided looking in her direction. The hearing began with attorney David Morrison presenting all the evidence they had gathered, the documents found in the cabin, the certificates proving that Michael was the son of Robert Henderson Clark, and especially the handwriting analysis showing the forged signatures. Then it was Preston's defense's turn. His lawyers presented the property deeds and called Barbara to testify. "Mrs. Barbara, did you voluntarily sell the properties to Mr. Preston Caldwell?" asked the defense attorney. "Yes, I did." "Are all the signatures on the documents yours?" Barbara hesitated for a moment before answering. "Yes, they are." Attorney David Morrison stood up. "Your Honor, I would like to ask the witness a few questions." The judge authorized it. "Mrs. Barbara, do you remember specifically signing the sale documents for the properties located on Blossom Street and Riverside Avenue?" Barbara looked clearly confused. "I don't remember exactly where each property was. Do you remember going to the notary to acknowledge these signatures?" Mr. Preston handled all of that." "How did he handle it if the signatures were supposed to be yours?" Barbara began to visibly sweat. I gave him authorization." "Written authorization?" "No, it was verbal." Attorney David Morrison turned to the judge. "Your Honor, the witness has just confirmed that she did not personally sign at least 2 of the documents, contradicting her previous testimony." Preston's lawyer tried to intervene, but the damage was done. Barbara had clearly contradicted herself. The judge asked a few additional questions and then announced he would give his decision in a week. On the way back home, attorney David Morrison was optimistic. "I think we won, Mrs. Jennifer. Barbara practically confirmed that Preston forged the signatures. But what if the judge doesn't see it that way? It's hard to interpret it differently. She clearly said she didn't sign the documents personally." A week later, David called with the decision. "Mrs. Jennifer, we won!" Jennifer almost shouted with joy. "We really won?" The judge invalidated 2 of the 3 sales due to signature forgery, and he ordered the 3rd to also be reviewed because Barbara did not have legal authorization to sell without probate. "And now the properties return to your children. Preston will have to return everything, including compensation for the years he used the lands illegally. And will he accept that? He may try to appeal, but with the evidence we have, it's unlikely he'll be able to overturn the decision." Jennifer hung up the phone and hugged the children, who still didn't fully understand what was happening, but knew it was something good. "Kids, you just became rich," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "How so, Mom?" Tyler asked. "We won the lawsuit. Grandpa Robert's lands are ours now." Emily and Ethan began jumping for joy, while Tyler, more mature, asked, "And now, Mom, what are we going to do?" It was a good question. Jennifer was still processing everything that had happened. A few weeks later, when all the legal documents were finalized, Jennifer made some important decisions. First, she sold the property near the commercial center for 400,000 Rs to a real estate development company. With that money, she bought a comfortable house in the city so the children could have access to better schools. The second property she turned into a small family inn near the river. Tyler, who had always enjoyed working in tourism and fishing, helped manage the business on weekends and school holidays. The third property she decided to keep as a family reserve, creating a small organic farm that provided food for the inn and for sale in the city. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. With their financial life stabilized, Jennifer was also able to help the Riverside community, where they had lived. She created a small fund to help other families in emergency situations during floods and financed the renovation of the local school. Mrs. Dorothy received a new, comfortable house near the inn, where she continued to be like a grandmother to the children. Mr. Samuel became the inn's official fishing guide, using all his decades of experience on the river. Preston tried to appeal the decision, but was unsuccessful. He ended up being forced to pay compensation of 100,000 reais for the years he had used the properties illegally. Part of that money Jennifer donated for improvements to the Riverside community's infrastructure. Barbara, after the whole process, grew closer to the family, initially with hesitation, but gradually built a relationship with her grandchildren. Jennifer, despite being hurt by Barbara's attempt to harm them in court, decided that the children deserved to know their paternal grandmother. Attorney David became the family's official lawyer, handling all legal aspects of the new businesses. Jennifer was always grateful that he had believed in her case when she was just a desperate woman with some wet documents. Tyler excelled in his studies and earned a full scholarship to study business administration with the goal of expanding the family businesses in the future. Emily developed an interest in environmental law, inspired by the family's fight for justice. Ethan grew up happy and secure, without the worries that had marked his early years. The inn prospered, especially during fishing seasons. Jennifer discovered she had a talent for management and hospitality, creating a welcoming environment that attracted tourists from various regions of the country. 2 years after the court decision, the family decided to return to the banks of the Shenandoah River for a special visit. The old shack where it all began was completely destroyed. Only a few pieces of rotten wood marked the spot where the structure had existed. "This is where it all started," Jennifer said to the children, pointing to the site of the old shack. "And what if we hadn't found those documents?" Emily asked. "Then we'd still be struggling to survive, not knowing you were entitled to a better life." Tyler, now 17 and much more mature, looked at the water flowing calmly. "Mom, do you think Grandpa Robert hid those documents on purpose, as if he knew that one day someone in the family would need them?" It was a question Jennifer had asked herself many times. "I don't know, son, but I like to think so, that somehow he knew you would find what was hidden when you needed it most." Ethan, who was now 8 years old, was playing by the water's edge when he found a piece of rusty metal among the stones. "Look what I found." It was a small key, similar to the one they had found with the documents in the cabin. "Do you think it's from Grandpa Robert too?" he asked, handing the key to Jennifer. "It could be, my son, it could be." Jennifer put the key in her pocket, thinking that perhaps there were still more family secrets waiting to be discovered. But that didn't matter anymore. They had found something far more valuable than any hidden treasure. They had found their own strength, their ability to fight for justice, and the unity that made them invincible. That night, at the inn that was now their home and business, Jennifer sat on the porch watching the river under the moonlight. The children were asleep, safe and happy. The surrounding community was thriving with the projects she had funded. Life had finally found its course. She thought of Michael and how proud he would be to see what the family had built. Perhaps he had hidden his true identity out of fear that his family's troubles could harm Jennifer and the children, but in doing so, he ended up depriving them of knowing the wealth that rightfully belonged to them. Life had taught Jennifer that sometimes the greatest treasures are hidden in the most unexpected places, waiting for us to have enough courage to look for them. And when we find them, our responsibility is to use them not just for our own benefit, but to make the world a better place for everyone around us. Mrs. Dorothy appeared on the porch carrying 2 cups of coffee. Couldn't sleep either. "I was thinking about everything that happened. It feels like a dream sometimes." "It wasn't a dream, my dear. It was struggle, courage, and a lot of determination. And luck too. Luck helps those who help themselves. If you hadn't had the courage to fight for your rights, you'd still be suffering today, not knowing a better life was waiting for you." Jennifer smiled, knowing Mrs. Dorothy was right. The courage not to accept an unfair situation had completely changed her family's destiny. In the following months, the inn continued to grow. Jennifer hired some people from the community to work with her, providing jobs and income for other families in the area. The business became a benchmark for sustainable tourism, respecting the environment and valuing the local culture. Tyler finished high school with the best grades in his class and was preparing to start college. Emily was in 6th grade and was already showing leadership among her peers, always standing up for the weaker ones. Ethan had become a cheerful and confident boy, very different from the shy and frightened child he was when they lived in the cabin. Barbara moved into a small house that Jennifer had bought in the city, close to the family's new home. Gradually, she reconnected with her grandchildren and became the grandmother they had never had. Jennifer learned to forgive the past and focus on the future they were building together. Attorney David Morrison became more than a lawyer to the family. He became a true friend. He continued to handle all the legal aspects of the business and often visited the inn with his wife and children, enjoying the tranquility of the place he had helped create. One day, 2 years after the lawsuit, Barbara sought Jennifer for a private conversation. "Jennifer, I need to tell you something I've never told anyone." "What is it, Mrs. Barbara?" "About Robert's disappearance. I always knew what really happened." Jennifer felt her heart race. "What do you mean?" "He didn't vanish mysteriously. He discovered that some people were interested in his properties and that they might use methods, let's say, dangerous to get them." "What people?" "Preston's father, among others. Back then, there were already outsiders interested in buying land in the region for low prices." "And what did Robert do?" "He faked his own disappearance to protect the family, but he planned to return when the danger passed." "And why did he never come back?" Barbara began to cry softly. "Because he had a heart attack 2 months later, in a city far from here. He died alone, far from his family, trying to protect us." Jennifer hugged her mother-in-law, finally understanding why Robert had hidden the family documents so carefully. He knew that one day they might need them. "Why did you never tell this before?" "Because I was afraid, and after I sold the properties to Preston, I was also ashamed. I knew I was betraying Robert's memory." "Mrs. Barbara, you did what you thought was best at the time. You don't need to blame yourself for that. But now you know the truth. Robert wasn't a man who abandons his family. He was a man who gave his life to protect it." This revelation gave new meaning to all the struggle they had faced. They weren't just claiming properties, they were honoring the memory of a man who had sacrificed everything for his family. Jennifer decided it was time to tell the full truth to the children. She gathered Tyler, Emily, and Ethan in the inn's living room on a Sunday night, when everyone was together. "Children, Grandma Barbara told me something very important about Grandpa Robert that you need to know." She told the whole story. How your grandfather had discovered that dangerous people wanted his properties, how he faked his own disappearance to protect the family, and how he ended up passing away alone, far from everyone he loved. Tyler, who was now 18, was the first to speak. "So Grandpa died a hero." "Yes, son, he gave his life to protect the family." Emily, 12 years old, was clearly moved. "And Dad, did he know about this?" "We don't know. Maybe he knew part of the story, and that's why he preferred not to talk about the family. It might have been his way of protecting you, too." Ethan, who was now 9, asked a simple but profound question. "Mom, does this mean we're a family of heroes?" Jennifer smiled, hugging her youngest son. "It means we're a family that doesn't give up when things get tough, and that we'll always fight for what's right." That night, after the children fell asleep, Jennifer went out for a walk alone on the property. She looked at the inn they had built, at the orchard bearing fruit, at the community they had helped develop. Everything had started with a cabin sinking in the river and an unexpected discovery. But what had truly transformed their lives wasn't the documents hidden by Robert. It was the courage to fight for justice, even when winning seemed impossible. 3 months later, the family received an unexpected proposal. A television network wanted to make a documentary about their story. The producer had learned about the case through a journalist who had followed the legal proceedings. "Mom, do you think we should accept?" Tyler asked. Jennifer thought carefully about the proposal. "If we do this, it will be to show other people that it's worth fighting for our rights, that even when it seems impossible, justice can prevail, and to show that poor families have rights too, and they shouldn't be afraid to claim them," Emily added. The family decided to accept participating in the documentary. The program aired 6 months later and had a major national impact. Many people wrote to the family sharing similar stories of fighting for property rights. Inspired by these stories, Jennifer decided to create a non-governmental organization to help families in similar situations. With the support of attorney David Morrison and other volunteer lawyers, the NGO began offering free legal assistance to people who couldn't afford legal help. Tyler, who had started business school, began dedicating part of his free time to helping with the organization. Emily, still in elementary school, but already showing an interest in social issues, participated in awareness events whenever possible. The inn continued to thrive, but now it had an additional purpose. Part of the profits was allocated to fund the NGO's work. Tourists came not only to enjoy the tranquility of the place, but also to learn the family's story and support the social projects. 5 years after that afternoon, when they found the documents in the sinking cabin, Jennifer was on the inn's porch reading a report about the cases the NGO had helped resolve. There were dozens of families who had recovered their properties or received fair compensation. Mrs. Dorothy approached, now 75 years old, but still active and involved in the family's life. "What are you thinking about, my dear?" "I was thinking about how life is surprising. If someone had told me on that afternoon of the flood that 5 years later we would be here, helping dozens of other families, I would never have believed it. Life has those kinds of surprises indeed, but it didn't happen by chance, no. It happened because you had the courage not to give up." Barbara joined the two women on the porch. At 60, she seemed much happier and more at peace than when she had arrived to testify against the family in court. "Jennifer, a letter arrived for you from the capital." It was an official letter from the state government. Jennifer opened it with curiosity and could hardly believe what she read. "What is it?" Mrs. Dorothy asked, seeing her surprised expression. "They want to appoint me to a state land rights council. They say my experience and work with the NGO qualify me to help create better public policies." "Will you accept?" Jennifer looked at the children playing in the yard. Tyler was teaching Ethan how to play soccer, while Emily was reading a book under a tree. Life had given them so much good that it seemed natural to give back by helping to improve other people's lives. "I'll talk to the children, but I think so." That night, during the family dinner, Jennifer told them about the government's proposal. "It would be a way to help even more people," she explained. "Mom, would you do that from here at the inn, or would you have to move?" Emily asked. "Most of the work would be right here, with some trips to the capital when necessary." Tyler, who was now in his second year of college, immediately supported the idea. "Mom, you have practical experience that most people working in public policy don't have. You can make a real difference." Ethan, 10 years old, made his characteristic contribution. "If it's to help more families like ours, then you have to accept." Jennifer accepted the appointment and began working on creating clearer and more accessible laws regarding rural property rights. Her personal experience brought a unique perspective to the government discussions, always reminding the politicians that behind each case were real families with dreams and needs. The inn continued to operate normally, now managed mainly by Tyler during the periods when Jennifer was involved with the council work. Emily, who was in high school, also began to help more actively in the family business. 6.5 years after the discovery of the documents, the family received exciting news. Tyler had graduated with a business degree with the highest grades in his class and received an offer to pursue a master's in sustainable development at a federal university. "Mom, if I accept the master's program, I can focus my research on community tourism and rural development. It would be a way to continue the work we started here, but at an academic level." "And the inn?" "Emily can take on more responsibilities. She's 16 and already understands the business as well as I do." Emily, who had truly become a responsible and dedicated young woman, agreed enthusiastically. "Mom, I want to take on more responsibilities. And when I finish high school, I want to study law, like I've always said." Ethan, now 11 and the most optimistic in the family, summed up the situation simply. "So each of us will study a different part of the work. Tyler will study business and development, Emily will study law, and I'm still deciding, but it will be something that helps people too." Jennifer looked at her 3 children and felt immense pride. Each of them had found their own way to contribute to making the world better, inspired by the struggle they had faced together. That night, after everyone had gone to sleep, Jennifer went out for her usual evening walk around the property. It was a ritual she had developed over the years. a moment of reflection and gratitude at the end of each day. She stopped at the spot where the old cabin used to stand. It was still possible to see some traces of the wooden foundation, now completely integrated into nature. A small plaque they had placed there 2 years earlier marked the place where it all began, in memory of Robert Henderson Clark, who protected his family even in absence, and in gratitude for the discovery that changed our lives. The Henderson Clark family. Jennifer touched the plaque gently and whispered, "Thank you, Grandpa Robert. Thank you for hiding those documents where you knew we would find them at the right time." A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the surrounding trees, and for a moment Jennifer felt as if someone were there with her, silently approving all they had built. 7 years after that flood afternoon, the family's life was completely transformed. Tyler was finishing his master's degree and had already been invited to work for an international sustainable development organization. Emily had been accepted with a full scholarship to one of the best law schools in the country. Ethan, at 12, was a cheerful and intelligent boy who talked about becoming a teacher. The inn had become a national reference for responsible tourism, receiving visitors from all over Brazil and even from abroad. The NGO founded by Jennifer had already helped more than 200 families recover their properties or obtain fair compensation. Jennifer's work on the State Council had resulted in several important changes in legislation, making it easier for poor families to claim their property rights. She had become a national reference on rural land issues. Barbara, now 65, had become a present and caring grandmother, making up for the lost years with constant attention and care. Mrs. Dorothy, at 80, continued to be the heart of the extended family, always ready with wise advice and delicious food. One Sunday afternoon, the family was gathered on the inn's porch to celebrate Ethan's birthday. As the children played and the adults chatted, Jennifer observed the scene with deep satisfaction. "What are you thinking about?" Tyler asked, sitting down next to his mother. "I was thinking that if that cabin hadn't sunk that day, maybe we would never have found the documents. And if we hadn't found the documents, we would never have known the truth about our family," Emily added. "And if we hadn't known the truth, we would never have fought for our rights," Ethan completed, always quick to join the conversations of his elders. Barbara, who was listening to the conversation, smiled with a mix of sadness and gratitude. "You know that Robert would be so proud of all you've accomplished, right? And Dad too," said Jennifer. "I think he would finally understand why Grandpa Robert hid those documents." Attorney David, who had practically become a member of the family over the years, raised his glass of juice, a toast to the Henderson Clark family, who proved that justice can prevail when people have the courage to fight for it. Everyone toasted, but it was Ethan who always had the last word on special occasions. "Mom, do you think there are still more secrets hidden, waiting to be discovered?" Jennifer laughed, remembering the little key Ethan had found years before, which was kept in a drawer at the inn. "Perhaps, my son, but we've already learned that the greatest treasures aren't the ones we find hidden, they're the ones we build with our own hands. And with courage," Tyler added. "And with unity," said Emily. "And with lots of love," Ethan completed. That night, after everyone had left and the children were asleep, Jennifer stayed alone on the porch looking at the stars. In a few days, it would be the 8-year anniversary since they found the documents in the cabin. 8 years that had completely transformed their lives, from a desperate family, living in a cabin about to sink, to a prosperous family that now helped other families in similar situations. But what made her most proud wasn't the money they had earned or the success of their businesses. It was seeing how each of her children had become a person of integrity, determined to make a difference in the world. Tyler was about to start an international career helping rural communities in various countries develop sustainable projects. Emily would be a lawyer dedicated to defending the rights of the most vulnerable. Ethan, still a child, already showed a compassion and intelligence that promised a great future. A shooting star streaked across the sky, and Jennifer made a silent wish that her family would always have the strength to keep helping other people and that they would never forget where they came from. The next morning, she woke up with an idea. It was time to write a book telling the whole family story. Not to glorify their struggle, but to inspire other people not to give up when life seems impossible. She spent the following months writing in her spare time, with Tyler's help to organize the chapters and Emily's help to review the text. Ethan contributed by remembering details that the older ones sometimes forgot. The book was published a year later with the title The Cabin That Sank and the Dreams That Emerged. All the publication's proceeds were directed to the family's NGO and to other organizations working on land rights. The launch took place at the inn itself, with the presence of all the families who had been helped by the NGO over the years. It was an emotional celebration where many people could tell their own stories of overcoming hardship. During the event, an elderly lady approached Jennifer. "My dear, my granddaughter read your book and told me your story. I want you to know it inspired me to fight for my family's rights too." "How so, ma'am?" "My husband passed away 10 years ago and left a small property. But some men from the city showed up saying the land is theirs now. I always thought there was no way to fight against them, but after reading your story, I decided to seek help." Jennifer smiled and touched the woman's arm. "You did the right thing, and if you need help, our NGO is at your disposal." Moments like this confirmed for Jennifer that all the years of struggle had been worth it. Every family they managed to help, every injustice they managed to correct, every person who was inspired by her story not to give up. 9 years after the discovery of the documents, Tyler was working abroad, but always came home for the holidays. Emily was in her 3rd year of law school and was already interning at the family's NGO. Ethan, at 14, had become an excellent student and showed an interest in social sciences. The inn continued to prosper, now managed mainly by Emily, with the help of a small team of local staff. Jennifer divided her time between her work on the State Council, supervising the NGO, and caring for the family. Barbara, now 70, had become responsible for the inn's garden and for preparing some of the traditional dishes served to guests. It was her way of contributing to the family's success and feeling useful. Mrs. Dorothy, at 85, no longer had the same energy as before, but remained a constant and beloved presence. She spent most of her time on the inn's porch, telling stories to Ethan and the employees' children. On a June afternoon, exactly 9 years since the discovery of the documents, the family decided to have a special celebration. They invited all the people who had been important on their journey. Attorney David Morrison, Mr. Samuel, the families helped by the NGO, and even some former guests who had become friends. During the party, Jennifer gave an emotional speech. "9 years ago, when our cabin was sinking into the river, I thought we were losing everything. I never imagined we were actually gaining a new life. What we've learned over these years is that true treasures aren't property or money. They are the relationships we build, the people we help, and the certainty that we've made a difference in the lives of other families. But none of this would be possible without each of you who supported us along this journey. You are our true wealth." Tyler, who had returned from abroad especially for the celebration, also spoke. "When I was a child and our cabin was sinking, I was afraid of the future. Today, at 24, I know the future is built by courageous people who don't accept injustice. My mother taught us that no matter how difficult the situation, there's always a way to fight for what's right. And that when we manage to win, our responsibility is to help others win too." Emily, at 20 and about to graduate from law school, spoke on behalf of the new generation. "Our story proves that justice is not a privilege of the rich. It's everyone's right. And as a future lawyer, I promise to continue fighting so that more families have access to the justice they deserve." Ethan, at 14, surprised everyone with the maturity of his words. "You always ask me what I want to be when I grow up. Today I can answer, I want to be someone who makes a difference in people's lives, like my family has done in the lives of so many families here today." At the end of the party, when everyone had left and the family was gathered on the porch, Mrs. Dorothy made an observation that stayed in everyone's memory. "You know, Jennifer, when you arrived here more than 10 years ago, I saw a desperate woman with 3 small children. Today I see a community leader with 3 extraordinary children. Life can truly surprise us when we have the courage to fight." Jennifer hugged the woman who had been like a mother to her during the most difficult times. "Mrs. Dorothy, if it weren't for you, we never would have made it. You were our first guardian angel. Nonsense, my dear. I merely offered you a place to stay. The ones who changed your lives were yourselves, with courage and determination. That night, Jennifer wrote in her personal diary, 9 years have passed since we found Grandpa Robert's documents. 9 years of struggle, growth, victories, and most importantly, of discovering who we truly are. We are not just the heirs to some properties. We are a family that learned that true wealth lies in the ability to make a difference in other people's lives. And that no matter how dark the moment may seem, there is always a hidden light waiting to be discovered. 10 years after that flood afternoon, the Henderson Clark family had become a national reference in community development and social justice. But for them, the most important thing wasn't the recognitions or awards they had received. It was knowing they had honored the memory of Robert Henderson Clark and transformed his silent protection into an active force for social change. The small key that Ethan had found years before was still kept in the inn's drawer, perhaps waiting to reveal new secrets in the future. But the family had already learned that the greatest treasures are those we build with our own hands, with courage, love, and an unshakable determination to do what is right. And so, the story of the cabin that sank in the river became the story of a family that emerged from the waters stronger, united and dedicated to helping other families also find their own golden light hidden beneath the loose floorboards of life. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this moving story and where you are watching from. If you know of a similar situation or have something to share with us, leave it in the comments with sincere words. Do you believe Jennifer made the right decisions throughout this journey? We would love to read your opinion. Thank you so much for your company. Don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other touching stories.